Welcome viewers. Today in this lecture I will be discussing about some applications of contemporary issues in organizational theory like managing organizational conflict. So first we will discuss about what is conflict, what are the sources of conflict and how the conflict arises between stakeholders and subunits. In various organizations, different subunits have various emergent issues of conflict in order to make themselves more competitive and to attain their objectives. What are the models of conflict we will discuss about, and conflict and organizational outcome, and then finally we will discuss how this conflict can be resolved. So what is organizational conflict? Why conflict arises? Organizations always see some instances of conflict. The clash that occurs when employees try to achieve their goals. So, the clash that occurs when the goal directed behavior one unit thwarts the goal of another unit. Although conflict is perceived as something which is negative, research suggests that conflict can actually improve organizational effectiveness. So, there is a whole lot of debate on whether conflict is positive or negative. Conflict is functional or dysfunctional. So, with this we will understand what is conflict first and how the conflict arises, the genesis of conflict, the sources of conflict in the organization and how that can be resolved. Can we overcome inertia or conflict leading to learning and change? So, as we know that organizations keep on changing, updating itself in order to sustain and survive, so there is a likely chance of conflict arising in the organization. So, how to overcome the resistance, how to overcome the conflict? We will discuss certain examples of conflict in various organizations. Just to take an example of Microsoft, various sources conclude that Microsoft is riddled with dysfunctional conflict that could soon hamper its ability to remain competitive. What is dysfunctional conflict? Conflict which is detrimental to organizational performance. What is functional conflict? Which can help an organization to improve performance. Pretty much across the board, people are saying that Microsoft is dysfunctional. It concludes an industry expert's perception. So, they are not cooperating across business groups. There is lack of cooperation across various business units. How do we define conflict? Conflict is a process in which one party perceives that its interests are being opposed or negatively affected by another party. So, there are conflicting interests of different subunits, subgroups or divisions which may lead to overall organization or which may hamper the performance or growth of the entire organization. So, there is cooperation and competition among organizational stakeholders. There are different stakeholders, multiple entities working in an organization. They are collectively working for the achievement of common objective or purpose, like management, employees, unions and several other stakeholders. They are all working together to achieve the objective or purpose. They are working together for organizational performance or attainment of goals. And during the process of carrying out various activities, there are likely chances of difference in opinion, clashes of interest when they are vying for or they are trying to get resources, or say resources in terms of raw materials, in terms of infrastructure, which are very limited in the organization. So, all these subunits will have some kind of fight over the resources which are very scarce and rare. Now, we understand what is organizational conflict in more detail. Beyond a certain point, conflict becomes a cause of organizational decline. Conflict leads to inability to reach at a consensus, arrive at a decision, and too much of time which is spent on bargaining rather than acting swiftly to resolve problems. So, most of the time it is seen that people, when there is an issue, so they, instead of solving, they take it as an ego issue, personality clashes in different units, make it very personal, and instead of solving the problem, they get mired with the issues of conflict. So, on balance, organization should be open to conflict and they need to recognize its value. So, there is relationship between conflict and organizational effectiveness. The level of conflict, as it is very low, and on the other hand, on the x axis if you say level of conflict, on the y axis if we understand organizational effectiveness, both studied as in the levels of low to high. So, when the level of conflict is very low, it will not have an impact on organization's effectiveness. When the conflict is very high, it is assumed to debilitate the organizational performance. Then we will understand what is the conflict process. Conflict as a process. So, there are several variables which are influencing process of conflict, the sources of conflict, the conflict which is related to the perception differences, emotional issues, and which will express itself in form of manifest conflict, then which will impact on conflict outcomes. So, there is a complete cycle of conflict escalation. There are different models of conflict. One such model is Pondi's model of organizational conflict, which explains the conflict process in more details. What is the conflict process? Conflict is a process because in that process there are 5 sequential stages. The stage 1 consists of latent conflict. No outright conflict exists, but there is a potential for conflict because of several factors which are hidden or latent factors. A source of conflict can be due to interdependence. What is interdependence? Between different departments, they are depending on each other for their technology, for their expertise of manpower because of the resources. When the idea is developed, that idea has to be shared with other departments. A product is developed, that has to be labeled, branded, so it has to go to the next step. So, there is interdependence between departments and units. Then difference in goals and priorities. Each department or unit has a different goal. Some departments are looking for quality, some are looking for certain other objectives. Then there are also bureaucratic issues because of the procedures, the formal rules, regulations, and the authority structure in the organization. These bureaucratic factors can also lead to conflict in organizations. Incompatible performance criteria. Certain times there is incompatibility in the performance criteria set by different units. Competition of scarce resources. So, these are various sources which can lead to conflict. Stage 2 talks about perceived conflict. There are subunits. Subunits become aware of the conflict and they begin to analyze it. Conflict escalates as the groups battle over the cause of the conflict. When in the perceived conflict, the conflict is there, it is perceived by units. Subunits become aware of the conflict and they begin to understand what is the reason of conflict. Conflict further escalates as the groups are, there is a tussle between the groups over the reason or the cause of conflict. Stage 3 is felt conflict. Subunits respond emotionally, take it as an emotional issue, personal issue. They take it as very, very personal rather than understanding that it is departmental or the organizational issue. So, subunits respond emotionally to each other, to the people who are representing the other departments, and attitude issues they polarize into us versus them. What I want to convey is that many a times is conflict starts because of scarcity of resources, procedural issues, because of authority structures, but when you analyze it further, it is the conflict which emanates because of scarcity of resources, interdependence. Further it expands or further it expresses itself and it becomes an issue of personality and ego clashes, us versus them. So, people who are associated with each group or each unit start fighting over personal issues. So, cooperation between the units declines or decreases. What began as a small issue or a problem further escalates, elaborates into huge conflict. Stage 4 talks about manifest conflict, which is expressed. which can be seen. Subunits try to get back at each other. They are fighting and there is open aggression, exchange of words, verbal abuses. Passive aggression is stop working, do nothing, non cooperation, and organizational effectiveness suffers as a result of these passive and active aggressions. Stage 5 talks about conflict aftermath. What happens after the conflict has started? Conflict is resolved in some way or the other. If sources of conflict are not resolved, the dispute will arise again. If it is not curbed at the very initial stage, it will escalate. The organizations will suffer because of the conflict and its after effect. Now, to understand the Pondi's model of organizational conflict starts with latent stage 1, which is latent conflict. Stage 2 is perceived conflict. Stage 3 is felt conflict. Stage 4 is manifest conflict and stage 5 is conflict aftermath. Latent conflict, no outright conflict exists, but there is a potential for conflict because of several factors. What are those factors? The conflict arises because of interdependence, difference in goals between the subunits and their priorities. And there are certain bureaucratic factors, long winding procedures, seeking suggestions and permissions from from employees at different hierarchical levels, from the bosses, performance criteria, incompatible performance criteria, and competition for scarce resources. That is the stage 1 conflict, which is latent conflict. The stage 2 conflict is perceived conflict. The subunits become aware of the conflict and it began to analyze. They understand that the conflict escalates as group battles, as a fight between them or us and them, and they fight over the cause of the conflict. And the third one is called the felt conflict. The subunits respond emotionally to each other. They take it as a personal tirade against each other, and verbal abuses and attitude polarizes us versus them. So, what began as a small issue has escalated into a huge amount of conflict. The stage 4 talks about manifest conflict, that is, subunits try to get back at each other, they fight, there is open aggression, and this hampers organizational effectiveness, organizational performance. The stage 5 is the aftermath of conflict. Conflict is resolved in a way that leaves subunit feeling very combative or cooperative. They feel that how the conflict happens in the organization. Organizational conflict outcomes. What is the outcome of the conflict? There is potential benefit as well as dysfunctional outcome. The positive side of the conflict is it improves decision making, strengthens team dynamics. When people are working together, so they have different opinions, diverse ideas, diversity in their background, their experience. There are also, like, there is age diversity, expertise diversity, their belonging, their upbringing is different. So they have different value system. So obviously people bring in new insights when they work together, and it helps in improving decision making. Everybody has a different unique way of thinking. So the benefit of conflict is it will lead to improved decision making. It strengthens the team dynamics. If you are facing a difficult situation together, initially you may have differences in opinion, but finally when you are fighting out successfully that situation, when there is an event of crisis, all the subunit is suffering, all the employees working together to solve that issue, then in the process they have understood each other, strengthening the team dynamics. Dysfunctional, which is not related to the performance, dysfunctional outcome, it diverts energy and resources. When people take it as a personal issue, attitudinal issue, ego related, ego clashes and personality clashes. So, the people associated with the department, within the department working in the same group, or the different departments reduce the effective energy and resources. That will reduce their motivation, level of motivation. It weakens the knowledge management, it reduces their effective spirit and increases frustration, dissatisfaction. It leads to stress, and people, when there is conflict which is ongoing, will lead to turnover, absenteeism, when there is non cooperation, aggression at each and every problem. So, that will lead to turnover and absenteeism. Now we will discuss about task versus socio-emotional conflict. As we have discussed so far, there are conflicts which are related to task, which is called functional conflict. That means which is just related to the task or task related conflict, which is constructive and which will lead to improvement in performance of organization, the goal that we are working on, the goal of the organization. Socio-emotional conflict is something which occurs due to relationship issue, which is related to emotions, sentiments of people, which is related to difference in personality, value system, which is related to emotions, and which is not very healthy for an organization. So, understanding the constructive or task related conflict, conflict which is aimed at an issue or which is related to a purpose or a goal, like say suppose an organization like Nestle faced a problem due to a product failure, like Maggie had monosodium glutamate content. There are some issues like the product failed, the vehicle caught fire. This is one issue of an organization and the entire organization is suffering. So, they need to solve it. There are several such instances where Indigo has recently faced some crisis because of changes in flying rules, or there are sudden emergence of some crisis or the other. COVID-19 has seen several crises which has mired the entire industry. Many of the organizations have severely suffered because of sudden emergence of several such crises which are not directly related but which are caused by the environment. Now, with the change in technology, new technology has been deployed in organizations. So, many organizations have faced several issues. They have to make their industry smart and intelligent. So, in that case, the conflict may arise because the processes have suffered, because the entire organization is facing several challenges. So, conflict which is aimed at an issue which is not directly related to the parties associated with the organization and its subunits is called constructive conflict, which is related to the task. It helps recognize the problems. If people work together, they understand the issue, the crisis which the organization is facing. They try to find out alternative solutions and understand the issues, try to resolve the issue by giving different alternative solutions. This is potentially healthy and valuable. Everybody contributes new ideas of resolving that crisis and the issue which is at hand. Socio emotional or relationship conflict is a conflict which is viewed as a personal attack, introducing the perceptual biases. It occurs because of the biases, human biases. Everybody has some kind of perception about the other individual. So, before whether it is, we generally have a tendency to form opinion about others or the biases, and whether it is real or not, people still continue with those biases. So, it distorts the information processing of an individual, and which is the major reason for relationship conflict or socio emotional conflict. How to minimize the socio emotional conflict? One such measure is emotional intelligence. You should better be able to regulate your emotions. Every employee should understand that we have to control our emotions. Emotion should not deter our information processing or decision making. Viewing others' emotions as an information. Then you need to also have a cohesive team. More trust and latitude should be there. Understand other team members better. So, empathy should be there. You must understand other individuals' problems, their difficulties before making any opinion. Motivated to minimize escalating conflict. Minimize the conflict and try to understand what is the exact issue. The third factor is supportive team norms. Appreciate honest dialogue without any personal agenda. There has to be honest interaction between members of the team without any personal biases affront. Some norms might discourage displaying negative emotions. So, we will understand now what are the sources of conflict. Incompatibility of goals. One party's goal perceived to be to interfere with others' goals. Differentiation, different values and belief. Differentiation means differences in values and personal beliefs of individuals. Cross cultural and generational conflict. There are people from different cultures, background, and from different upbringing working in the organization together. There are different generational cohorts working together, so which will also lead to differences in value systems, differences in opinion, differences in their thought process, and which can lead to different types of solutions coming out from them when there is a problem to be resolved. So, because of the attitudinal differences, because of perception, because of value system, cultural differences, there is a difference and which can be one source of conflict. Task interdependence. Conflict increases with interdependence. Higher the risk parties interfere with each other. Then scarcity of resources, like it motivates competition uh, amongst the groups and subunits or the departments to have maximum control over the resources, whether it is manpower or whether it is or the human capital or the resources like infrastructure, uh, finance, or any other. Every department tries to acquire maximum resources in order to prove themselves better than the other department to achieve their own goals. So, mostly the departmental members or the employees working in subunits and departments, they want to have control over the resources, control over finance, control over every facility which is limited in the organization. Then ambiguous rules. For if the organization has low formalization, the rules are not very clear, not very clearly placed, it creates uncertainty, it threatens goals. People are not able to understand the different units and subunits within the organization have no clarity about what is their objective or the purpose. So, ambiguous rules threatens the goals, and without rules people rely on manipulation of the facts. There is less clear rules or ambiguity in rules, so there is likely chance of politics arising in such a scenario. Communication problems or the issues, when the things are not very clear, when the rules are not very clearly explained, when there is lack of communication between different levels of management, there is no proper communication by the department or the management to employees, it increases stereotypes, reduces motivation to communicate, and it escalates conflict, which will spoil the organizations or which will deter organizational performance. So, we have discussed in this module, in this lecture, we have discussed various examples. We have discussed about conflict, what are different connotations of conflict, functional and dysfunctional conflict, the sources of conflict, why conflict arises between stakeholders, subunits. We discussed about Pondi's model of conflict, the process, the various processes in conflict, and then conflict and various outcomes. If the conflict is positive, it is beneficial to the organization, it helps in improving decision making. Conflict which is related to relationship issues will decline organizational performance. Thank you.